definitely make a comment on they look pretty good. Hello, everybody.
G'day.
We were just joking about how we have what looks to you guys as matching hoodies. This is the Wellness Group / Synergy branding here, but they are in fact not matching, but you just can't tell. But you know what? I think we can rock it. I think we can play the game. Who wears it better?
I was gonna say who wore it better. I'd say we look kind of like monks. We got our little black robes on, our green robes.
We just want to stay warm here. You know, you may notice that we shed the hoodies as we get fired up here. We're really excited that you're all joining us. I've got tons of people on the call, and we're going to jump right into the content. But before we do, I just wanted to give people a bit of a framework for how the next 4 weeks are going to go. If you noticed when you registered, we're going to be doing weekly webinars. Nice and short. That's some of the feedback we got was it would be great if we could keep the webinars shorter, especially during the day. So today our goal is to be done in 25 minutes, allow some time for questions. Just so you know, you're going to receive an email along with that's going to include two things. So one is an ebook, which you can actually download, and it contains a bunch of really useful information. The Eat by Design ebook, it's like a manual actually, so it'll be a really great thing to follow along for the month. And also you'll get a special offer, a link, which we'll explain at the end of this webinar. Okay. Now let's just, I think we should jump right into the slides, because we actually did put together a slide deck for you guys. And really, I think the big thing, whenever, yeah, go ahead. Start.
I want to push the button. I want to do something.
Today we are going to dive into the top 3 diet tips. Now, these are things that we've encountered, we've used it for ourselves, helped the practice members to implement. It's now been for the Wellness Group anyway. It's been about 8 years that we've been running Eat by Design workshops. We used to run a whole Eat by Design coaching program. I know for Dr. Craig, you've been running these types of workshops for a long time.
Yep.
So we've really tried to put our heads together to come up with what are the best 3 strategies that you can put into play starting today that will help you lose weight, because that's often what a lot of people are interested in, especially this time of year. I know there's that's something that I've been hearing a lot of from practice members.
Yep.
But also about feeling better, right, and actually having more energy, feeling a greater sense of better mental clarity. As we start to implement some of these habits, we'll talk about, there's a whole bunch of benefits that you can gain that go far beyond what it says on the scale, right? That's just one metric.
Yep. Yeah. I was going to add, with this COVID pandemic, it's put us into a completely different rhythm. We're hearing time and time again from patients that stress levels are high. We're having less time to go to the gym. The gyms are closed. We can't get the exercise maybe in the same capacity that we did before. And the weight starts to creep up. The diet starts to change. And I mean, that's kind of not atypical when you're under stress, as your cortisol level rises and you start craving fats and carbohydrates, and you start trying to satiate the metabolic load that high stress levels create for your physiology. And so you start to add weight to your body, right? And so as stress levels have risen and through this whole pandemic, we nicknamed it the pandemic pounds back in March, I think it was, right? Yeah. And it starts to add up. So, but then, it starts to raise your inflammatory markers within your body and in your bloodstream. It starts to create some joint aches and creaks that start to affect just the way your body performs on a daily basis. So this kind of is a bit of a reset. We wanted to reach out and try to help people to really start to refocus. We've said it time and time again over in the office and here in the webinars. There has never, ever been a more important time and more clearly for us to understand that how we manage our health and the process in which we take steps to improve our health is so important. We see it time and time again in this whole pandemic, is that those that are of poor health status are most affected by something like SARS-CoV-2. And so the healthier you are, the more resilient, the more capacity you are able to handle stresses, the more capacity you have and resiliency. And so this becomes bigger than just looking good. It becomes a bigger health issue. And so it's time for us to really put focus to that. And these are some things that we can change. Like this is a readily thing. This is one of our most attended workshops and webinars that we usually do, because people can do this for themselves. And it's a matter of trying to get some refocus. And that's really what we hope to do today is over the next 4 weeks is start to create some focus points that you can concentrate on, easily attainable, that you can see some results quickly, and you can start to implement plug and play today.
Yeah, that's when in a time when we feel like we have very little control over what's going on. I feel like a lot of stuff is happening to us. These steps we'll talk about are things that you can actually you have full control over. Okay, sometimes it doesn't feel like we have a lot of control, but there's by taking just tiny steps that can really give you that confidence that like, oh no, I do have control. I can help work to improve my health, and so that's what I wanted to really just jump into. So let's just see what button. Oh, the next button. There we go. Now, one of the big things that I know something we get faced with, I recently joined a group of other healthcare professionals talking about nutrition. It's a private group. And one of the things that I like, it seems like the more that I spend time learning about nutrition, the more confusing it can get. Like, you go to chapters or you log into Amazon right now, and there's hundreds of thousands of books under the heading of nutrition. It can be really confusing. And so we want to Eat by Design. We've actually kind of set perhaps some different criteria to determine what is the best way to fuel the body and kind of what are the guideposts. There's no one diet. That's one thing we can say for certain. There's no one diet that's good for everybody. And Eat by Design is not a diet. It's simply a set of principles that then you can put in place in your own, that can influence your choices. Okay. And so today we'll talk about a couple of key principles that whether you choose to put them into practice at 100% or 5%, like it's going to inch you toward a better expression of health. And when the more I start to, and I know Craig and I have talked about this so much, and one of the challenges that we get reflected back to us from practice members is you may launch into something with a whole bunch of motivation. You get all this energy at the start. You're like, yes, I'm going to make some changes to my health. And when the motivation is high, we can perceive that we can take big chunks, right? We can actually take on really big habit changes. What the research actually supports now is that the best way to create habit change is by starting really small. So today, again, we're going to go through 3 kind of big concepts, and it's up to you to decide what's the most reasonable small chunk of that you can commit to, that you already want to do, and that you can say is like, yeah, that would be easy for me to do. Those are the 2 most important things. Like you want to do it and you keep it easy. And then over time, that habit can either stack other habits on top of one another, or that tiny habit being can grow. So I just wanted to give that pre-frame, because what we don't expect and what I don't even encourage is like, you're all in 100% on like making these major changes. That more often than not, and in fact, I would say most of the time, leads to failure. And then that failure can cultivate this belief that like, oh, I can't do it. Right. When in fact, you're working against a whole bunch of stuff that's baked into your physiology, baked into your neural circuitry. And so starting small and applying these principles in a way that you think is manageable for you and that you can commit to, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think that's the basis of the yo-yo diet is that you start gusto and you do something, you feel miserable, you feel like you're cheated out of something, like you're restricting yourself in such a capacity that it's starting to affect your mental state, and then it just becomes so frustrating that it's not even worth doing, right? And we see it time and time again, even in the fitness kind of realm, is Well, if I don't go and do my full hour and my 30 minutes on the treadmill and then do my 30-minute circuit, well, it's no point in me going, so I'm not going to go today. Whereas if you just went for 15 minutes, like that could be phenomenal, right? And it's still a step forward. So, taking what Dr. John just said, I want to reiterate is that when you do one of these kind of simple things this next week, celebrate those wins. Like really make it physiologically valuable to yourself by recognizing how that makes you feel by accomplishing something small, right? It's like we ask each other quite often is like, how did that feel when you took that walk in the forest? Like, how did that make you feel? And it's attaching a physical activity with some emotion. So
amplifying the emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you start to paleo pancakes that that layering, right? You start to amplify that, but you stack them and then you celebrate that because at the end of period of time, you've got a whole bunch of them. It's kind of like, the gratitude jar. It's like you put something that you're thankful for on a piece of paper and put it in a jar. And at New Year's Eve, you open up the jar and you start pulling out all the things. Man, that's like a huge 365 days of fantastic things that happened.
Yeah.
So it's just layering.
Yeah. Okay.
So
why eat? Now, this is really, I think, the crux of it, and perhaps what differentiates the Eat by Design method from other methodologies around nutrition is we want to really consider, okay, well, what are the fundamental reasons? Like, why do we even need to eat in the first place? And if we're in a live group, people would start throwing out, and some of you are probably already thinking like, well, we need to eat for energy, right? Like food provides energy for the body, which is absolutely true. It's, we sometimes we eat because it feels good, right? And that's something that, there's an emotional kickback from eating. The social reasons,
it's
right?
a huge one for people, I think, is the emotional side of eating.
Yeah, both good and, maybe there's some positive.
Like I said, like when we're stressed, we eat carbs or crave carbs and fat because that's a quick and fast fuel source for cortisol, which loves to take that sugar and use it up for combustion of all its metabolic processes.
Yeah. Social reasons too for eating, in certain contexts for sure, in families, whether it's at the nuclear family level or the more your cultural level, that's why we choose to eat the foods that we eat. But fundamentally, the reason why we have to eat is we already covered one is energy, right? Fuel. So let's think about it as fuel, putting fuel in the car. And then the other one is building blocks. This is one that is rarely considered, but is fundamental. It's actually, I think, a crucial thing to wrap your head around. So just think about if you have a blueprint for a home that you want to build and you're trying to decide, okay, what materials am I going to build this house with? And you want the house to last as long as possible. You want to get the most return on investment for the value of the house. And so, of course, you're gonna probably do some research. You're gonna figure out, okay, well, what's the best quality materials that I can use, or you're gonna consult with people to identify what are the best quality materials so that I get just the most value out of this house.
What's going to make the strongest, healthiest, biggest, best house that we possibly could make?
Yeah, and actually, and we're no different. Like we have a blueprint. We've got this genetic blueprint in our bodies. Every cell has this blueprint, but generally you could think of there's this genetic blueprint that actually determines, it dictates what's required in order for your body to be the healthiest, the strongest, the most resilient, to expand your potential to actually be able to live the longest, healthiest life possible. And in those, really, you can think of like the genetics of your body is your blueprint. That's what actually ultimately determines what's the best quality fuel and what's the best building blocks for the human form, right? And it's actually different, based on what type of animal, like, or you can take a plant, right? But a plant has a certain genetic requirements that determine what is the best fuel sources for it, what building blocks it requires. And so we really just need to look to, okay, well, what are the genetic requirements for humans? And this goes well beyond nutrition, right? But today we're going to stick to the requirements that come as a result of food. And if we think of that, that's actually what really how we consider what falls into Eat by Design. It's about finding the foods that have the highest nutrient density, which is both, the fuel and the building blocks component. So the highest quality building blocks, the highest quality fuel, and then also foods with the least amount of toxicity. This is something that, I wasn't really conscious or aware of this until, I started to dive into this, the research, but, most foods are toxic. Like they have some level of toxicity to the body. And so we want to be aware of that so that we can choose foods that are on the low end of the toxicity scale and on the high end of the nutrient density scale. So fortunately, you don't have to do all that heavy lifting of trying to figure that out, because that's what we've tried to really clarify and then simplify with the Eat by Design program. So let's jump right into it, because we're already 18 minutes in, Craig. Okay, we got to go. So number one is pretty simple, right? We're actually trying to keep this as simple as possible, but there's some profundity to this. So to eat real, I don't know if that's a word.
I think you made that up.
Okay, we have to make this is also profound. Okay, it's simple but profound. How about eat real food? And what constitutes real food?
Whole foods, like just one single ingredient would be kind of what I would deem constitutes real food. When you start adding in a whole bunch of synthetic man-made things versus nature-made things, you start to complicate the physiology of your body and how it's designed to process that food. And you hear that time and time again, right? Like it could be preservatives or colorants or additives that give, it's something like MSG, which is an additive that heightens the sensory taste buds of your food substance, but it has really bad implications to your overall health. So when we talk about eating real food, we're talking about one single ingredient.
Apple's an apple. Steak is beef.
That's it. Yeah. And simple as that. So when we start to implement this strategy, we've got kind of a tactic for you to start to do this. And I always like to share this story about like a patient of mine years ago, and he used to love chicken wings. And he's like, I'm not going to stop eating my chicken wings. I love my chicken wings. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to tell you to stop eating chicken wings, but all I'm going to ask you to do is something simple, which is fresh fiber first before every meal. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, grab yourself a handful of carrots or some celery or some broccoli or whatever vegetable you think you'd like, and have that first before you sit down and devour your plate of chicken wings. He's like, can we make a commitment to that? He's like, sure. So we did. And sure enough, after a period of time, he's like, you know what? I kind of cut it back. I can't really eat a dozen wings. I can eat 8. And so what we started to see then is like a slow, like a process of change, that he started to get some fresh, good raw nutrients into his system, provided his body with an abundance of good cells that his body can use and start to building blocks to create new, healthy, vibrant cells. And so we started to see some change that was sustainable. He could commit to that. It wasn't like getting rid of the chicken wings and eating a plate of salad. It was, let's start with something simple that's doable, and we can put it into play right away.
Yeah. A big kind of feature about this, like eat the real food first, is that apart from developing the habit of eating healthy food first, it's also, it's helping to quieten down the signals that were probably driving you to eat the we'll call it the unhealthy food. Chicken wings, I think you could make in a very healthy way, but
for sure,
it's all the sauces and stuff that go along with them,
and the beer, and
right? Yeah, but there's the having the nutrient dense food first will actually through all the signaling pathways that go from the gut to the brain help to kind of tone down those the cravings, and that's what will instigate those changes, so that your brain starts to go like, oh, okay, man, we'll personify the brain for a second, but it's like, I don't really need to, drive this human to reach for the sweet, salty food when I know I'm going to get these nutrients satisfied through these other foods.
It is a bit of a complex neurological process, but more bulk within the stomach stretches those baroreceptors, the stretch receptors within the gut. And that tells the brain, hey, we've got a lot of food in the system, so we don't need to eat as much. It's kind of like when you go to, and you're just pounding back food, you get to that point sometimes where you've crossed that line where the satiation center hasn't been reached. You see this classically, actually, funny kind of anecdote, but years ago in some of the pizza places, you could go for the all-you-can-eat pizza. And what they would do is they actually knew this process, so they would bring you a slice at a time, because it took a bit of a lag time for your stomach to actually register that you were full, right, and your brain to stop, right? And it's kind of like you eat to the point where you're full, but then you don't realize how full you are until a few minutes after. But anyways, the fresh fiber there, it starts to create bulk. It satiates the brain to say that we've got a good amount of food in the system. And then the other stuff that goes in doesn't take up as much of that space.
Yeah.
So you don't overeat. It's a good way to avoid overeating, is adding bulk to your diet.
Yeah. Now, number two, and this is actually to play off of what Dr. Craig was just talking about, eating the real food first, including fiber. Like, that's a great strategy. One of the best in terms of turning off that, or turning on the satiety signal, like telling your brain that you're full, actually comes from protein, because protein is, and particularly animal-based protein, is the highest nutrient-dense foods that we can eat. In fact, animal liver is the highest nutrient-dense food in the human diet, and meat, muscle meat, it ranks pretty highly as well. And so we recommend actually eating protein with every meal. When it comes to the actual, we'll talk about quality first, and then we'll talk about how this relates to weight loss. There are a really important consideration when you're choosing, because one of the big concerns that people have about eating animal protein is the quality issue. And, apart from all the other myths that are out there about animal protein being bad for you, today we don't have time to dive into this, but if anyone is concerned about the health implications of eating more animal protein, please email one of us. I'd be happy to jump on a call and discuss this, because the research is overwhelmingly in favor of eating more animal protein, not less. But you won't hear that many places, okay? Because there's a whole political movement that's very powerful, that's pushing for a plant-based diet. Nothing wrong with plants, but if you're concerned about your own health and your longevity, animal protein is, in my opinion, and not just my opinion, the science supports that is a necessary requirement. One consideration is the quality. So we already eats, right? It's not just what we eat, but we have to consider what the animals are eating, and without going, again, down too many rabbit holes, you do want to consider the quality of the protein, and we can share some local resources, some farms that do some really great, pasture-raised animals. But in terms of beef, good example, grass-fed beef, higher nutrient dense and has less toxicity than your conventionally raised beef.
Grain-fed animals, etc.
Yeah, like in the picture here, cows are designed and meant to be on pasture. Now, protein specifically is a great strategy. Like, eating more protein is a great strategy to lose weight, and there's a 6 different reasons. So I wanted to jump into these. And Craig, I think that first one, it raises your metabolism. We kind of hit on this already, but ultimately, if we're trying to burn energy, right, we're trying to, like, fat stored on the body is there as a response to our environment. Like, it's based on what our bodies perceived in the past as necessary to survive. And so we stored fat, often because of stress. And it's the stressful environment that is telling our brain, well, we're eating more foods, but it's also telling our brain, like, ugh, we got to conserve, because we never know how long the stress is going to last for. Protein, actually, just by eating protein, it raises your metabolism. So it causes your body to burn more energy, which is a good thing. It's about a 3x's your metabolism. It improves insulin sensitivity, and that's actually crucial, especially in the context of just how much blood sugar regulation problems that people with prediabetes or actually been diagnosed with diabetes in Canada, that number just keeps going up every year. So anything we can do to improve our insulin sensitivity is going to help our body manage that blood sugar.
Back to one of our earlier comments, like 70% of the worst cases with COVID have metabolic issues, right? Diabetes or metabolic syndromes or any of the others. So how well your body processes blood sugar regulation is a huge implication on all the other aspects of your health.
Yeah.
From liver function to digestive function to neurological function, everything. So.
Yeah, it slows digestion transit time, so that actually allows you to feel more of that mechanical sensation of feeling more full. It literally means that you're going to eat less.
Which ties back to number one, because you have to use more cellular activity to break it down.
Yeah. It also, because it's so nutrient dense, it actually chemically, it sends signals as your body's perceiving there's protein in your digestive tract. It sends the satiety signal, which is the signal going to the brain that says we don't need to eat anymore. Which is why little kind of pro tip, a little habit that you can just be a little simple one is eat your protein first. So if you've got a plate of food, and let's say we're
going to do the fiber first. Then we can do the protein.
I would actually say do protein first and then fiber, but we can we'll talk about that later.
Well, I don't want to confuse people, but if you're going to do the pizza, do the fresh fiber first. If you're going to do the steak and salad, do the steak first.
Yeah. And the protein, because of that reason, it'll tell your brain I'm full, I have enough.
Well, the other hormone, we all hear about insulin, but the other hormone that nobody talks about is glucagon, and that's the one that is the counter. There's always a yin and yang in your body. There's a part that revs you up. There's a part that brings you down. There's a insulin that takes the sugar out of your blood and into your cells, and then there's the glucagon, which kind of manages that and keeps the insulin in check. So they kind of balance each other off. So, and that protein fires up your glucagon levels. Mm-hmm. So
reduces cravings for a similar reason, and that often cravings are because of nutrient deficiency, but it could be relative, right? You just
it's a total blood sugar thing. Mm-hmm. Like you have that sugar crash after you eat a candy bar. Excuse me, the cravings come back because your brain is like it loves the sugar, right? And as soon as that level starts to drop, it wants more because it's like a drug, and it's so you start to crave stuff.
Yeah. And then also by consuming more protein, you're going to build bigger engines on just your body's going to perceive that it's in a state where it can build muscle tissue, it can build other connective tissue, and all those things help to drive
more mass,
more energy consumption.
More muscle mass has been shown forever to be associated with higher levels of metabolic activity, less body fat, stronger, bigger, faster.
And so even if you're not doing any additional activity, you can still gain muscle mass through just changing diet. If you combine that with doing some resistance training or something like that, then it goes through the roof. Number 3, and this one fits with what we were talking about, eating fiber. And also just vegetables are a good, high nutrient dense food. And so eating more vegetables actually, I think, is a great step. And notice that we're suggesting things to do. You're adding stuff in, like adding habits maybe, or you're making habit change where you're adding stuff instead of subtracting things. So eating more vegetables, I mean, the reality is it probably means you're going to eat less of something else. Eating more protein means you're probably going to eat less of things that are maybe less beneficial to you. So vegetables, when you build your plate, we actually want to have 2/3 of the plate as vegetables. That would be a great strategy. By calories, it's going to be probably less than 50%, but certainly as far as volume, we want to get lots of vegetables in. A good principle is eat the rainbow. So lots of different colors. A great resource that we'll share in the email is this Dirty Dozen and Clean 15, and that's just a great a list of the foods that have the highest and lowest amount of chemical toxicity based on like the sprays and herbicides and things like that they use. So you'll get a resource, a link, for that, and you can go and download those 2 lists for 2020. So that's the top 3. And you know, I'm going to save this topic until next week.
Sure. I was going to go back to the other one if I could.
Yeah.
The vegetable side of things is, you know, when you can, if your budget allows, organic is going to be better. So a way to do this without trying to bust the bank is to look at what foods are you consuming in the highest quantities over the course of a week. And if you're going to put your budget towards trying to get organic in some form, I would choose those over the others first. So like, don't try and go gusto and get everything organic. But if you're consuming protein at every meal, you want probably the highest quality protein that you can afford, and budget wise. Same thing with your vegetables, is try to choose the best quality that you can in abundance. So that way you're minimizing your chemical load that you're putting into your system, and you're increasing your nutrient density load big time. So,
sure.
You know, you think about a strawberry from California, it was probably picked like 3-4 weeks ago. And then it was sprayed with something that's going to give it some longevity. And so the nutrient density starts to decrease the longer it's been off the plant. I mean, in the summertime, we're so fortunate we can go out to the berry farm and get some strawberries that have just been picked in the last 24 hours or even just right off the plant. That is always going to have the highest nutrient density that your body could probably obtain. So, and the more clean it is, the less, you know, the more organic it is, the better.
Yeah. So. Yeah, local definitely trumps as best you can. Hard this time of year, tough to do.
Yep.
We're going to leave that topic till the next week. But so we mentioned as part of your email, you're going to get, well, let's summarize first. So the top 3 diet tips. Now, some of those you may not necessarily associate with like, oh, what kind of you know, weight loss tips are these? The biggest, certainly the biggest one that I would focus on there is the protein. We know, and there's just like tons of research now to show, if you simply just increase the amount of protein you're eating, it's a great strategy specifically for weight loss, but for pretty much all measures of health. So that would be the one I would focus on.
Yes, and so just for some clarity there is when you think about protein, if you look at the palm of your hand, that's about the portion size of protein that will give you roughly 25 grams of protein per serving. So the thickness of your hand and the size of your hand is kind of a quantity wise. Now, of course, you can get that in a protein shake or other words, but you're better off to get it from a food source, like maybe some fresh fish or some beef or some eggs. Any of those
chicken.
Yeah. So they just kind of give you kind of an idea. So women especially, we're talking to you, is you're not getting enough protein. This has been known and shown for years. This is a big factor. So making sure that you're trying to get protein at every single meal is imperative, because it helps with bone density, it helps with muscle tone and muscle mass, and that's a huge thing to protect you as your body gets older. So just kind of give you a bit of a kind of a clarified way of understanding what you need in terms of quantities. Yeah. So think about trying to get protein at every meal, no matter what it is. Cook up a whole bunch of boiled eggs, and then you've got them ready to go. You'll see in the next slide here, but through the Life by Design or the Eat by Design 30-day challenge, all of you are going to be receiving a link that you can access. This is completely free. It's for you to check out. You just put your name in and your email, and for 30 days, you're going to get an email with a video that you can access. There's going to be some strategies and tips that will tell you. There's going to be some recipes in there, but just simple ways that you can implement some of these strategies that we're going to be talking about over the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, definitely check that out. Both Kristen and Jenna, the two nutrition specialists there, they put a lot of thought into the content, and they have a lot of experience working with clients. So some gold content there. They're both moms as well, so there's some good strategies about
how do I get my kids to do this.
Yeah, exactly. So we will. I'd like to end it there. I apologize. We went over by a few minutes, so next week we're going to tighten things up a bit. But I do want to open it up. If there is any questions, I want to check and see. You're welcome to hit the chat function there. and you can either put questions there, or if you're watching the replay, you're able to contribute a question, and we'll make sure that we answer that at the next webinar. Next webinar, on that note, is next Wednesday. So we're going to move to Wednesdays at noon for this rest of this month. So hopefully we'll see all of you back next Wednesday. You will get a reminder email with you follow the same link, but you will get a reminder email just to make sure that you have that in your inbox.
So between now and then, try to implement some of these strategies. Try to get some vegetables at every single meal. Try to get some protein at every single meal. Try to get some whole foods as best you possibly can, and just start to implement those strategies. Take note of how your body's doing, how your digestion is doing, how your energy's doing, how your sleep's doing. And then if you have questions next week, we can always tweak things and give you some feedback and see how you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much for showing up live. Love to see the big group here, and we will check in next week.
Have a good week.